We'll look at some spiritual power tools in our thinking nature to keep us high-minded, strong, and affirmative so that we can live the inspired way, the way that Zechariah said in his chapter 4, verse 6. You know this line, not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord. We want to live that inspired way, living in an alignment, as Peter said in his meditation, in one with the one, living from that oneness as that oneness in our lives. And won't it feel great to be able to get up every morning and be equipped to live not from have to, got to, need to, not from that human willfulness, but to be able to live from I want to. I'm an expression of the divine, and to just jump out there, as our song said, in the enthusiasm of life. And it's great to be alive. Well, one of the benefits of living from spiritual inspiration is that you stop trying to change everybody else and everything else out there, and you start focusing on, get busy with your own life instead. You have a power, and we know this, we have a power within us that is not of this world. And part of our spiritual discipline in unity, our spiritual practice in unity, is learning to use and commune with and align with and use the spiritual principles that then allow us to be co-creators in our life, to create an extraordinary life. I always say I always take issue with the words that we're creators of our life, because then I have to ask you, when's the last time you made a human heart or an ocean, right? So we co-create. We use the spiritual principles to become instruments of Spirit, so that the Spirit of God can work in us, through us as expressions in the world. And when we become willing to follow then our own spiritual light, we discover that there is a spiritual mastery, and that we can learn to live in the absolute certainty that no matter what happens in our life, we're in alignment with God, we're being guided by God, we're working with God, and that God means everything that happens, means it for good. And so then we have to use our faculty of imagination sometimes to be able to see that good, because there can be some appearances and some circumstances and some experiences that don't look so good. And then how are we going to mine the gold and extract the good from that experience? We're going to use our imaginations as a spiritual faculty within us to learn to do that. We see the quality of imagination in the story of Joseph in the Bible. And it's a long story for Joseph. It's chapters 37 through 50. But I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version, and so we can refresh ourselves with the story and then take a look at that, how he used his power of imagination. The faculty of imagination in us is the spiritual power that throws on the screen of our mind the pictures and the visions for our life. It's actually the messages. It's one of the ways that God speaks to us is in our dreams, in our visions, in our insights, in our hunches, in that. But it throws on the screen of our mind a picture that if it keeps repeating itself, I always say you need to pay attention to it. If something throws up on the screen and of your mind and then dissolves away, that's okay. But if it comes back and comes back, I would say heads up. It's a message from God. And Joseph trained his mind to see the good. He was known as a dreamer and an interpreter of dreams. And he trained his mind to see the good only. You remember that he was the favored son of Jacob. And Jacob had given him this coat of many colors. And where's Connie? Stand up, Connie. She's wearing the coat of many colors today. She has on this beautiful dress that has every color. Look like that. See, Jacob gave Joseph a coat that looked like that. You know, all the colors. Think about early Middle Eastern times, and to find those colors, those were berry stains and whatever it took to make color. So then the other 10 brothers, it just incited tremendous jealousy in them. It didn't help his case that Joseph, because he was a dreamer, he told his brothers, well, he had a dream in which he would become great and they would all become subservient to him. So that made him so angry they decided to kill him, and they took him out and they threw him in a pit and they left him for dead. But they had a moment of remorse, and so they fished him out of the pit. And as a slave caravan was coming by, they decided that was a better alternative, and they sold him into slavery. And then they went back and told Jacob that his favorite son had died. Well, he gets into town, into Egypt, and he's sold as a slave to Potiphar. And he worked with Potiphar for a while. And again, keep wanting to call him Moses. Joseph is just absolutely, well, I can turn this for good. I'm going to do a good job here. I'm working in the, upper echelon of Egypt. And then, because he was such a innovative, creative, wonderful guy, it attracted the affection of Potiphar's wife. So that didn't go so well for him. She made a false accusation that he made the moves on her, and so he was thrown in prison. So he's back in this imprisoned thing. And again, he steps up and does what's best for him. He uses his gifts and his talents, and he's interpreting the dreams of the guards. They unlock his cell. They let him have full run of the prison. And he's helping them. He's interpreting their dreams. And then his opportunity comes. Pharaoh has a dream, and he can't figure out what it means. And so the prison guards say, we know somebody who maybe could help you. And they bring Joseph into Pharaoh, and Pharaoh, he interprets the dream for Pharaoh. And the dream that Pharaoh had ended up being, Joseph interpreted it, that in Egypt there was coming a great drought that would cause famine, and that there would be 7 years of abundance and prosperity, followed by this famine and this drought, 7 years of famine. And so he told Pharaoh to be a wise king, that he needed to harvest all of the prosperity from the good years, store it so that they could survive during the famine years. And Pharaoh was so impressed with Joseph that he made him prime minister of Egypt, second in command only to Pharaoh, and he let him run all the operations. And so 13 years went by, and it was true. They had 7 years of great prosperity. They stored the grain, and 7 years of famine. And that's where we pick up the story, where we see over that time the growth and transformation in Joseph from being a braggart and kind of knowing I know it all kind of thing, to using his imagination and his intuition to effect change for good, to take it outside of just himself and to bring it to the larger world, to all of Egypt. And then we see the arrival of his brothers. They come to Egypt because they're starving. They lived in a neighboring land and they have nothing, and they come to Egypt seeking help. They don't know that Joseph is alive. They don't know Joseph is the one head of the Department of Agriculture as well as prime minister. And they come to Egypt for grain, and at first they didn't recognize him. And he kind of did some maneuvers that were sort of evolving in consciousness. But then when they finally recognized who he was, that they had tried to kill him and that they had sold him into slavery and now they needed him to survive, you can imagine they felt pretty doomed. They felt like nothing good was going to come from that experience. But this is where we see an understanding faith that's developed from opportunity to see the good regardless of circumstances. Joseph had to meet jealousy, injustice, slavery, deceit, imprisonment, uncertainty, deprivation. And he used every experience as a stepping stone to advance his consciousness. He claimed the goodness of God by using the faculty of his imagination to see something better for his life in every experience and in the midst of the experience. It's one thing to have a hard time, get through it, and then look back and go, well, that worked out. But when we use our faculty of imagination, it's to quicken our minds to the good that's there, even though we cannot yet see it. So we see him use this faculty not only to improve his own life, but the lives of those around him. And he says in these beautiful verses to his brothers, God has made me, so they're standing there thinking they're doomed, and he says to them, God has made me forget my toil in my father's house. God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. God sent me before you to preserve life and to preserve you and to save you by great deliverance. And then this famous line, Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. As for you, he said to his brothers, you may have meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. God meant it for good. And that's the power of our imagination, to recognize no matter what's happening, we can extract the good. God has made me forget my toil. So there's memory loss. When we begin to lift up into that realm of spiritual consciousness and become one with the one, there's memory loss of any of the lesser consciousness, any of the lower consciousness. God has made me forget my toil, and the good allowed the good to show up in his experience. God has made me fruitful and prosperous in the land of my affliction. He's telling us, in the midst of my experience, I prospered. In the midst of the experience, things worked out. I didn't have to wait for them to end. I prospered. I was fruitful. Joseph learned that dwelling on the hard experience of the past would only impair his present experience. And I have a friend, I love this line. He says, we have to spend our lives looking through the front windshield, not the rear view mirror. Not even the side view mirror. Look through the front windshield. And then somebody said to me the other day, I think it might have been you again, Doug, the front windshield is like 100 times bigger than the rear view mirror, right? So you've got all this expansive life, adventure, and road ahead of you, and you're spending all your time looking in the rear view mirror about how things didn't work out, and that went wrong, and this went wrong. Forget that stuff. We look through the front windshield, not the rear view mirror. So Joseph forgave his brothers, all of them, it said, and they even moved Jacob into town and reunited him with his father, with his favored child. And that reconciliation spiritually means that Joseph took his thought and all of his family of thoughts, his 10 brothers, and his father, his parenting thought, and reconciled them, took them out of the narrow-mindedness, out of the cruelty, out of the selfishness, and he let all of his thoughts conform to the pattern of the Christ within him. And that allowed him to see that his misfortunes were actually a part of a divine plan, a greater plan for the preservation of life, for the deliverance out of famine, out of starvation, and the restoration of good nationwide. So I love it that when something works out in spirit, it's a global answer. It's a global solution. It works not only for you, but for everyone around you. Spirit's answers always come. There's nothing selfish in them. Winifred Wilkinson Hassman, I was reading Your God-Given Potential, says, we must develop a way to relate to our world in a spiritual way. Developing our imagination gives us something to navigate internally the situations that arise in our life experience, right? Because it's all going on in our minds. Letting God ideas revolve and unfold in mind will result in a tremendous illumination of your whole being. It brings increased light, a feeling of lightness in the body. It releases darkness and heaviness, and there will be a new understanding of yourself and your relationship to your world that may result in changes to your physical living habits as well as to your mental and spiritual activities. Developing our imagination gives us something to navigate internally the situations that come and arise in our life. God has made me forget my toil in my Father's house. Picturing a greater reality causes that memory loss, causes us to forget the hurt, to let go of the hurt. Imagination allows us to substitute or replace thoughts of the negative for positive thoughts and shift you off that energy of creating something more horrific in your life. God has made me fruitful in the land of affliction, picturing a greater reality and a greater prosperity in the midst of your circumstances allows you to mine the gold and extract the gold from the experience. God sent me before you to preserve life and to preserve you and to save you by great deliverance. Picturing a greater reality brings ultimate healing and harmony and advances us in consciousness spiritually. As for you, you may have meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. It's hard to see that in some of our experiences, isn't it? You look and you look and you look and you think, there's nothing good about this. There is nothing good about this. But you have to work with that idea. My mom gave me a similar teaching. She used to say, and I'm sure it's a familiar word. I'm sure you've heard it. Everything that happens, happens for a reason. Right? We teach that in Unity. We create by consciousness. But she always added another line on to it. Everything that happens, because she was always forever doing that. She'd walk around the house and just espouse all these things. Everything that happens, happens for a reason. And that reason is so that the glory of God can be made manifest in you. In you. So that caused me a lot of sleepless nights. When something would go wrong in my life, and I was thinking, this is for the greater glory of God in me, through me, as me, whatever. There's greater glory in this, and to try to find it, to get the deeper spiritual meaning in the midst of the experience. It's how on earth is the greater glory of God happening in this? I have an experience in my life right now, and it's driving me crazy. Well, I'm not affirming that. It's shifting my consciousness. It's just, I wrote this lesson for me, because I want to be a Tasmanian devil about, I just want to spin around and all this. And I know that's not the answer. And I was out on a walk yesterday replacing my thoughts, manifesting love in the experience. And I love, my niece Ashley would say, I'm Aunt Ree. Aunt Ree, it's a first world problem, not a third world problem you're talking about here. It's so minuscule in the great ongoing of things, but your problems are your problems, right? They're there so that the greater glory of God can be made manifest in and through you. So I'm out on my walk and I'm saying, it's a greater glory of God in this. Just can't even believe this, and I got to confess, I'm still working on it today. But what I am getting is that, the greatest thing I can do in this experience is to love. And so what God is doing in me is opening and expanding my consciousness of love, deeper love, to find the meaning in the experience. So how on earth is the greater glory of God trying to come through me in this situation, or any situation for any of us? Because you say, I can't see it, I can't even catch a glimpse of it. No matter how much I resist, I want to make it about the other person. Don't you so want to make it about the other person? And that when you point your finger at someone else, 3 fingers are pointing back at you. So you so want to make it about you. I want to wallow in poor me and ain't it awful, and I tell myself I'm detoxifying myself when I do that. I'm getting it out of me. But the reality is, Spirit will remove it. Spirit will dissolve it. If I keep searching for the deeper spiritual truth, for the greater glory of God, I have found, like Jacob wrestling with the angel, he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. I can never get out of the situation until I get the blessing from it. And sometimes, this is important, sometimes you don't get the blessing immediately. Sometimes you just have to find a way to let things calm down, walk away, step away from the problem, and then when you get some distance and some perspective, you go, oh, now I see. And the internal teacher comes in and teaches us. Now I see, we say. That's the imagination that's producing a new solution, a new conclusion, a new possibility for us. If I kept searching, it always turned out that Spirit had a very special blessing for me. That Spirit was offering me a message of love that was mentoring me into expanded consciousness. That other person, that event, that circumstance is for the greater glory of God to be made awakened and made manifest in you, to grow you spiritually, to grow your consciousness. As for you, you may have meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. Everything that happens, happens for a reason, and that reason is so that the greater glory of God can be made manifest in you. So next time you're stuck on something, in fact, let's put our hands on our hearts right now. I have it in here somewhere. I don't know where it is. There it is. And think of an experience in your life, and let's just say, God means this for good. Together, God means this for good. And then you got to feel you got to feel after that. I am open to the good from this experience. Together, I am open to the good from this experience. I shall become very successful because of this experience. Together, I shall become very successful because of this experience. I will grow spiritually because of this experience. I will grow spiritually because of this experience. Now that should begin to shift to a feeling of possibilities and probabilities of different outcomes than maybe you've been so fixed on. So fixed on. I can get on it with both feet, can't you? I don't like that about myself. I said to a friend last night, I just so want to be a whiner and complainer about this, but that's not who I am in truth and in spirit. I so want to be Wouldn't it be wonderful to take the experiences of our lives in every experience and look for the greater glory of God? If I said to you that experience on your life right now is a gift from God that is meant to expand you into more than you ever thought you could be, would you mine for the gold? Would you shift off of whining and complaining and feeling upset and distressed about it, and would you begin to use your imagination to turn your vision steadfast to the possibilities of greatness that God is birthing in you because of this experience, not in spite of this experience? Would you do that? I think we all would. So when I finished reading in Your God-Given Potential, there was a series of steps for activating the power of imagination in us, and so I want to finish with those today. Steps to transform the pictures we're holding in our mind so we can change the conditions in our lives. And the first one that we want to do is cleansing. That we can't move along the spiritual growth carrying all the ugly patterns of what's happening, on all the negativity that's going on in our lives. No matter how long it's been in us, no matter what the way of the world says, no matter what the appearance looks like, you have to start training your imaging power correctly by first cleaning out false ideas. And you have to erase them from your mind. Otherwise, you get something that happens that I call double exposure. You're trying to lay over the top of old negative pictures, negative photos, your new thoughts of love and joy and harmony. But if you haven't erased the underlying photo, you're going to get double exposure. You're going to get mixed results. You're going to get mixed consciousness. So you want to start to train the imaging power correctly by getting rid of old false ideas so that you don't try to superimpose healthy thoughts on negative ones. You've got to do the cleansing. Emily Cady said, remember she talked in Lessons in Truth about chemicalization, that it was like pouring vinegar into sour milk, explode. You can't mix that negative and that positive. So you got to get rid of the negative pictures. And then we do that in the second step, which is observation. That the screen of your mind, if you take out all that negative experience, or the look of that negative experience, or the look of that terminal illness, or the look of that divorce, or that loss, or that bankruptcy, take all those pictures out, you can't leave the screen of your mind blank, because your imagination produces pictures. So you have to replace or use substitution or replacement by then putting the pictures in your mind of what you want to see expressed in your life. And you want to hold them there. Hold them there, and not in a strained effort. You want to just take an interest in, gosh, wouldn't it be wonderful if that happened? And wouldn't it be wonderful if kind of that went that way, and then as a result of that happened, and then so you start following a strand of thought that expands into multiple strands of thought that paints this wonderful picture of an alternative reality, like the current administration. Alternative facts. You want to give your mind alternative facts. The more we become interested in holding pictures of happy, healthy experiences, the easier it becomes to forget the old pictures of the past or the pictures of the current negativity. We must fill our mind so full of right concepts that it literally crowds out any other pictures. So, it always says in the Bible that Jesus set his face steadfast for Jerusalem. And it didn't matter if you looked at the map, he always went up to Jerusalem, which was up in consciousness, up in high and holy thought. If he was on the map, if Jerusalem is here and he was here, he went up to Jerusalem, set his face steadfast for high and holy thought. If he was over here, he went up to Jerusalem. If he was here, he went up to Jerusalem, up in consciousness, up into that habitation of peace, and producing new images. Once you get those new images, the third step is to say, God means this for good. God means this for good. And to give your time and attention to searching, to seeking the inner light of spiritual comprehension. How, God, how is this for my greater glory? Show me, show me, show me. Put that picture on the screen of my mind. And then from that holding to those ideas and those new pictures, we come into beholding. Charles Fillmore explains it this way. We are transformed by beholding, by looking into the perfect pattern of the indwelling Christ and beholding its perfection. It transforms us into its likeness. We hold a picture of what is true in spirit, regardless of what appears to be. So we take those divine ideas, life, love, substance, wisdom, joy, faith, power, paint those pictures in that experience and hold to that. And then we're lifted up and transformed into that. And then we go one step further. If we practice that, if we take on that using our imagination as a spiritual practice, we begin to perceive. We begin to perceive ideas through spiritual illumination, meaning we become instruments or open channels where God can imprint into our thought exactly God's thoughts. Our mind becomes like a stamp or an impression where we can get direct revelation from God. And you can skip all the other steps. You just, you get into an experience of your life and you get still, and then into your vision on your mind comes the answer, and you can get direct revelation from God. God means it for good. Computer crashes, your one great client takes their business somewhere else, you lose your job, lose your marriage, receive a threatening diagnosis. These things all seem like they can annihilate you, but they only annihilate the small self of you. The great I am in you is transformed, can use the experience to be transformed into the greater glory of God. Focusing on what's right about something rather than what happened or what might not happen or what might happen. When you let go of that, you cease to kick against your circumstances, and you train your consciousness to release those limiting thoughts and pictures and feelings and to perceive something greater. And this is a faculty that we live. When Phil comes to talk to us about the 12 faculties, you know how much he believes in these. We all do. So today I want to invite you to insist on God's goodness present in every situation. In whatever experience you're in right now, I'm praying for you and for me that we can see it, that it becomes manifest, and it will become manifest when we affirm that we are part of the eternal will of God's goodness for us. And that will open then to be able to see in our mind's eye God's plan of good in the experience. So let's take that into prayer for just a moment and affirm it for our lives. Hands on your heart again, and let's just say, God means it for good. Together, God means it for good. In loving presence, we are open and receptive and responsive to the good from this experience. We erase from the screen of our minds any negativity, any negative pictures. And we reflect only on pictures that are in keeping with the purity of the Christ. Life, love, substance, wisdom, power, joy, peace. Under the direction of God, we discard the false and we open to the truth. And we see good everywhere. I behold the Christ in myself and in all others. I behold the Christ in myself and all other persons and situations. I accept spiritual insight from God. I accept spiritual insight from God. Let's affirm it. I accept spiritual insight from God. My eye is single to the good only. As for you, you may have meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. And we take reassurance in this word this morning. We stand strong in our faith for the perfect outworking and for opening ourselves to the greater glory of God. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father. Amen.